Strap into your seats and get ready. It's time for the Mortarpod.
Hey everybody, Alex Stephenson from SeemsGoodMagic.com here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mortarpod. I apologize for the lateness, but Jake's having some major PC issues right now, so he's going to be unable to join us this week. But I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to talk about Travelers of Storia, my board game. We are right on the cusp of having the first prototype printed for it, and I'm really excited about that. So I figured this would be a great time to sort of give you guys an intro to the game, show you some of the cards, give you a little bit of information about how the game's going to work, the objective and stuff like that. So I've talked about it for a few months now. I've known, about it conceptually for a long time. I started a little over a year ago designing it, and the entire intention of the game was I wanted sort of the Magic the Gathering experience a little bit, in that I wanted players to be able to deck build. I wanted there to be a lot of card diversity. I wanted that sort of feeling, but I also wanted sort of a Dungeons and Dragons feeling too. So I really wanted it to be cooperative. I wanted you to have to use good strategy to work together to defeat, strong enemies. So I thought it would be kind of a cool, amalgamation of those two types of games. And I'm really happy with what I've come up with and what I ended up designing. And I think you guys are going to love it too. It's really an awesome experience to be able to play a game, even one player, which is a lot of fun too. So you can actually play this game one player. Otherwise, it's 1 to 4 player. But yeah, let's start on the info of the game. So I've got the game objective on the next slide here, and I'll sort of go through it. So Travelers of Storia is a 1 to 4 player cooperative fantasy board game. Each player gets to choose a combat deck, and a combat deck is just what you're going to be piloting throughout the game. And you get to choose your class too. So there's actually 4 classes in the game that you'll see in a bit. But yes, you use your allied unit cards to defeat enemy unit cards, and the object of the game is to complete each mission in the campaign. It is a campaign-based game, and each mission in the campaign can take up to anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half, maybe even longer, depending on how many players there are. The more players, the longer the missions take, because you will be having to fight more enemies and stuff like that. So you complete each mission in the campaign. Most missions have boss units, which I'll show you this podcast too. And boss units are pretty cool. They're going to be pretty unique, so you'll get a chance to look at that. And then finally, you're trying to achieve the highest achievement rating. And you get higher achievement from exploring more of the world map. So before I show you any of the cards, I'm going to be showing you what the world map is, what some of the world map cards are, because that's really what you're exploring to generate the events of the game. So really, yeah, there's 2 zones of play in the game. The world map, where you explore world map cards, and the encounter board, where all players encounter all the enemy cards. So there is going to be a glossary in the instructions, and that's where you can get more term definitions. But when something dies in this game, instead of dying, it's known as fatigue. So really, instead of like hit points that you would expect, normal RPG style, where you see, one of your guys has hit points, and when he runs out of hit points, he dies. In this, everybody has energy, and when their energy is at 0, they're fatigued, and once they're fatigued, they can still come back. But yeah, it's known as fatigued and energy, instead of dead and hit points that you would expect in other games. Let me sort of give you a background to how this game, the sort of the universe of this game. So it's called Travelers of Storia. So obviously it takes place at a place called Storia, and Storia is a planet that's thousands of times bigger than Earth. So all over Storia are what's known as the Nexus, and the Nexus is a teleportation gate system that whenever someone enters the Nexus, they're randomly teleported to another spot on Storia. And the people who travel the Nexus are known as travelers. So not everyone on Storia decides to become a traveler, because the planet is so big, and because it's a random teleportation system, once you enter the Nexus, you're pretty much guaranteed to never return to your home again. So the only travelers on Storia are sort of brave wanderers and legendary fighters and adventurers. So really, as you're playing, you're trying to recruit as many travelers as you can to help you in battle. But first, let's take a look at the map cards. So here's some example of the map cards. You can see the Nexus there on the bottom. So that's an example of what the Nexus looks like. It's just a gate system that when you enter it, you're randomly teleported. Now, in the game, you don't actually enter the Nexus because you're in the middle of a very intense battle with goblins, and there's a large. What's cool is there's this storyline that you get to follow as you're playing the game, and it sort of unfolds as you explore the world map. So though it is a linear storyline, it's really I thought it turned out great. I co-wrote it with a creative writing teacher, and I think what we came up with is great, and I think you guys are really going to like it. So thanks to Lisa Noner for helping me write it. I thought she did great editing work. She did great original work on it as well, and I think you guys are going to love it. So let's run through the example of the world map card. So first we have this thing that's called Campaign Event. You can see it's two swords crossing on a map. The campaign event cards are where you fight campaign creatures. So the only campaign that's going to be released with the initial release of Travelers of Storia is called Clan Blackcore. And Clan Blackcore is a bunch of different goblin units, creatures, enemies that you'll be fighting. And you only will be encountering them on campaign event cards. And they're much more powerful than the world enemy cards, which you encounter on the world enemy terrain cards. World map terrain cards. So this Flourishing Grasslands card, you can see, for example, is one example of many different terrain world map cards. If you notice this little extra symbol here on the campaign event card, you just see this sort of goblin head inside of a bubble. And that's on all of the cards in the game. That is the Clan Blackcore symbol. So that's sort of the set symbol for Clan Blackcore. It just indicates that all of these cards came from the Clan Blackcore set or expansion. But as you can see on Flourishing Grasslands, you see a bubble surrounding some sort of leaves or blades of grass. So any world enemies you encounter in the game that have a matching that blades of grass when you land on the Flourishing Grasslands, any world enemies that have that matching symbol on their card get bonus abilities. Think of it as you're on their familiar ground, it's called. So it's sort of like a home turf advantage that they get for you fighting them on that. Now, as you land on a terrain card like Flourishing Grasslands, you're going to be rolling 2 6-sided dice, and there's a list in your campaign logbook of different events that can be triggered from landing on the Flourishing Grasslands. So it truly is a very random game. What you encounter, if you find treasure, which I'll eventually be showing you. So it's constantly, there's just so much different things that can happen, which really makes it a fun game. You're going to be encountering all sorts of different enemies in all sorts of different terrain. It's a cool experience, you guys. When I release tutorial videos, hopefully over the next couple weeks, I think you're going to get a much better idea of how exactly the game goes down. But for now, I'm hoping that the explanations at least give you a little bit insight to what to look forward to. So now you're wondering the Nexus card. So if you don't actually travel through the Nexus, what's the purpose of the card? Well, that's what's interesting. You recruit travelers from the Nexus. So when you land on the Nexus card, that's when you'll have access to adding traveler cards permanently to your deck. And like I said before, traveler cards are very powerful, legendary sort of warriors and wanderers that explore the Nexus. And you get to permanently add them to your combat deck for the remainder of the campaign when you recruit them. So very cool in that respect. So this is an example of all the different world map cards. Next, this is the other zone of play in the game. This is the encounter board. So a lot going on here, I know, but awaiting deployment slots. You start every encounter with a certain amount of your cards in your campaign or your combat deck in the awaiting deployment slots. So think of the awaiting deployment slots as sort of your hand at the beginning of the game. But there is no purpose of having a hand in this game because you're not hiding any information. So the awaiting deployment slot is essentially your hand. And you will be deploying units into deploy slots from awaiting deployment. And you do that by taking actions equal to the card's action cost. So each player is allowed to take a certain amount of actions every combat turn. And you want to use up all of your actions that you can because unlike mana, that sort of accumulates and you choose colors and stuff like this. In this game, you just get a static 4 actions that you get to take per turn. And there is no colors associated or anything like that. You're not tapping anything. You're not really using a resource per se. You're more just taking a certain amount of actions to progress the combat. And you really want to make sure that you block all of your enemies that will be deployed in the front row, because if you don't, what happens in this game, instead of you taking a certain amount of damage or having life, like in Magic you have 20 life or something like that, in this game when you're hit you actually lose that many cards from your combat deck. So however many cards you get hit for are fatigued from your combat deck. And once you run out of cards in your combat deck and you would have to fatigue another card, you lose the game. So that's essentially why blocking your, randomly generated enemies is so important. But let me go over a few of the slots here. So we see a campaign enemy deck slot, a world enemy deck slot, awaiting deployment slots, deploy slots, front row, reserves, boss, treasure slots, traveler slot. Lot going on, I understand. But when you're setting up the game, you'll just place all of the campaign enemy decks in that slot, world enemy decks in that slot, so on and so forth. The only slots that should be empty, really, are the front row deploy slots, and that's about it. So that's where, when you first start an encounter, depending on whether you're fighting the world enemies or campaign enemies, which in this case, the campaign enemies are the goblin units, and the world enemies are a bunch of different types of world, different world animals that you'll be encountering. They're, at the beginning of the fight, deployed into the front row, and then it is your job as a player to successfully kill all of those units, or fatigue all of those units, with taking minimal damage as possible. So this is what the board's going to look like. Once again, once you see the tutorial, this is going to be much more clear. I'm going to show you exactly how it's going down. But next, let's show you the allied units. So these are the 4 gold-rated units from each class. So the 4 classes of the game are Champion, which is represented with Tamara Dragonsbane. Adventurer, Rhea Goldex, is the general of that deck. Grey Valent is the Guardian general, and then you have Talman Corsul, who is the Rune Mage general. So A lot of symbols that you might not be understanding now. That'll all be explained probably with the tutorials, just because I think the audio podcast listeners aren't going to get a very clear picture of what I'm describing. I'll try my best really quick to just sort of go through it. You can see this number 4 up there. That's how many actions they take to put them from an awaiting deployment slot into a deploy slot. Well, like I said earlier, these are all of the generals. So each class, whenever you choose a class, you're given a deck of 15 cards. That deck consists of all sorts of different cards and rated cards. So these are all gold rated. The way you can tell is this text in the lower right. This says gold champion. So it shows you that it's not only a gold rated card. Don't know why it does that. Not only a gold rated card, but a champion card. Rhea Goldex shows you that she's gold rated and she's an adventurer, Grey Valent, Gold Guardian, Gold Rune Mage on Talman Corsil. So you can also just tell by the border surrounding the card what kind of rating it is. I gave a couple other examples of other cards you'll find in the class decks to sort of show you the different borders as well. So Alluring Diplomat is a silver-rated adventurer card, so she's part of Rhea Goldex's combat deck. She's silver-rated. She has, her own unique abilities. Scholar of Antiquities is part of Talman Corsel's Rune Mage deck. You can tell she's bronze-rated by the border or by looking in the lower right and seeing bronze Rune Mage. So I hope that kind of makes it a little more clear. As you can see, their action cost is less. The Scholar of Antiquities only takes 1 action to deploy. The Alluring Diplomat only takes 2 actions to deploy. So I'll just quickly run through the types of abilities in the game. So you can see these top abilities with the sort of square with the number in it. Those are action abilities. So you can additionally, as well as take actions to deploy units, you can also take actions to use a unit's action ability. Now, action abilities can only be used once per encounter. That's something that's very different from Magic. When you think of Magic, you think of activated abilities, and they can, the units are tapped and you use them once per turn or whatever. In this, once per fight. So once per encounter, you get to use their action ability, and then you move them up in their slot that you have them deployed in to reveal the action ability expended text. If you look at this deploy slot, you can see at the bottom of it, it says action ability expended. So once you've used their action ability, you move them up in their slot, and then they can no longer use that action ability again for that fight. At the bottom, you see these sort of circles with numbers in them. Those are energy abilities. So energy abilities are on every unit in the game, not only allied units, but enemy units as well. So once per combat turn, you're going to be rolling 2 6-sided dice to determine which units get to use their energy abilities. Now, in the case of allied units, you can see Rhea Goldex has both Evade and Fortune Hunter. So when you roll either 10 or 11, you choose one of these abilities and she'll do it that combat turn. So she can either Evade, which means she can't be successfully attacked, or Fortune Hunter, where you get to take 1 card from the treasure deck. And taking 1 card from the treasure deck is very cool because treasure is used during encounters as well, and gives you bonus abilities. So treasure is a very valuable, important aspect of the game. You can see this little sort of triangle symbol next to some of the abilities. That's the Adept symbol. So the Adept symbol indicates that that unit can use that ability while they're still awaiting deployment. Now, let me remind you, the awaiting deployment is sort of like the unit is still in your hand. So if they have the Adept symbol, it means they can use that ability while they're still awaiting deployment, or essentially while they're still in your hand or not in the thick of combat. So Adept is actually a very good beneficial ability to have. Let me sort of run through how each class is different from each other, and that might give you a better idea now what class you would like to play when you eventually play this game. So the champion class consists of very efficiently action cost creatures with high attack. They are very good melee combat units that are efficiently costed. And also you get a good diversity in units, so you get a lot of versatility in your units. The adventurer class consists of units that are not necessarily efficiently costed, but help you sort of explore or reveal information about the world map before you've actually explored, which is tremendously beneficial. They're the only class that lets you do that. Additionally, they're the only class that has units that let you acquire treasure cards. Otherwise, you have to really acquire traveler cards that have the ability, or roll successfully on a terrain card and get sometimes events can be generated or encounters can be fought where you can receive a treasure card after you finish it. But the adventurers are the only ones that let you acquire treasure cards mid encounter, which is a very valuable ability. The Guardian class is sort of like the clerics of the game. So the Guardians or actually there's two different types of Guardian. So the sort of subclass within Guardian are the Sentinels and the Menders. Now the Sentinels are sort of like the Paladins or the Warriors of the Guardians, and the Menders are the Clerics. So they're the ones that will recover fatigued units back to their player's combat deck. And they're my favorite class. So the Guardian is a very important class for recovering fatigued units. Because let me remind you once again, once your combat deck has run out of cards, you lose the game. As you can see, Talman Corcel is the Rune Mages, and think of the Rune Mages as, the Wizards or the Caster class. So the Rune Mages have a lot of valuable abilities from the awaiting deployment slots. They're adept with most of their abilities, so they're just very powerful sort of spellcasters that are a very excellent support class. Their downside, of course, being they're kind of clunky to cast, sort of expensive, so they're not as quick as the other classes, but very powerful cards to have. So that's sort of the run through of the base classes. Now I'm going to show you the Traveler cards and the other sort of the treasure card and the campaign character cards, which is the remainder of the allied unit cards. Alright, so here are the Traveler cards on top here. You can see a bronze rated, a silver rated, and a gold rated Traveler. There's 50 different Traveler cards in the game, all unique, all with unique abilities. They're really the most fun, for me, the most fun part of the game is acquiring Traveler cards to permanently add to your deck and use them in combat, because they're all very good. So you can see they all have unique names. Androne, Bulwark of Satis, so he's from the Kingdom of Satis, and you can acquire him from the Nexus. Ayara, Mystic of Rani, she's from Rani originally, and then she eventually became a Traveler and started traveling the Nexus. And then Anna von Barov, who's a gold-rated Traveler. You can see she's very powerful. I guess I should go over this really quick. You can see this axe icon and this hand holding a lightning bolt icon. So the axe icon indicates the unit's attack ability, attack rating, and the hand holding a lightning bolt is the unit's energy rating. So remember, once again, energy is sort of the unit's hit points, and think of the attack as just how much it attacks enemies for. So that's an example of Traveler cards that like I said, you slowly acquire as you play the game, and you want to acquire as many as possible, because not only do they add to your combat deck size, which is beneficial because when enemies attack you, you have to fatigue cards from your combat deck, but you also additionally get bonus cards with abilities for your deck. Sometimes you get very valuable Travelers that are essential for defeating some enemies in combat. Down here you see a guy named Jonas Alger. He's got sort of that unique back. He's what's known as a campaign character. So as you can see, he's a little bit different. He doesn't have an attack rating or an energy rating, and that's because he's not put in a deploy slot. He's put in the campaign character slot that you can see on the screen here. And campaign characters are only in certain events, certain missions, certain encounters. So they're not going to be with you all the time. And the reason being because they're actually very powerful allied units. So as you can see, when this guy is in your campaign character slot, all of your deployed allied units have a bonus energy permanently. And then you see he only has energy abilities. So instead of attacking or using action abilities, campaign characters have a series of different energy abilities that, as you can see, he's got pretty much every number on the dice available except for 2. So what's really cool about the campaign characters is that they're constantly helping you in combat, every combat turn. The Potion of Fortitude is an example of a treasure card. This one is a bronze-rated treasure card, but when you acquire treasure, like this Potion of Fortitude, once per encounter, you get to use it, and then at the end of the encounter, all of your expended treasure is shuffled back into the treasure deck to be acquired later in the game, or just never permanently gone, I guess is the main point of it. But you can see the Potion of Fortitude. If you take one of your actions during your turn, you can return a fatigued unit to the bottom of its player's combat deck. So it's almost like recovering both one life to your deck and one unit. So that's sort of the example of all of the beneficial allied unit cards in the game. Next, we're going to go through the enemy cards of the game. So you can see the Huge Vermis is an example of a world enemy card. Do you see the Blades of Grass on it? That once again is referring to the you can see on the Flourishing Grasslands, it's got that Blades of Grass symbol. So let's say you land on the Flourishing Grasslands while exploring, you roll the dice and you have to go into an enemy encounter. Once you go in the enemy encounter, if there are any huge vermis in that encounter, this card will get a bonus +1 energy during that encounter. So instead of being a 1 attack 2 energy creature, it would be a 1 attack 3 energy creature. So you're on its familiar ground, it's more powerful, is basically as straightforward of an explanation as I can give. The Quarry Slave is an example of the Clan Blackcore campaign enemy. So as you can see from the picture, it's a goblin card. It has unique energy ability. This is the lowest level campaign enemy, so you can see, you know, it's nothing too exciting to look at. Pretty easy to defeat in combat, but I assure you, as you get further in the game, they get much more difficult. Now on the bottom here, you see an example of a boss card in the game. So the boss cards are actually the size of two normal cards. They don't have an attack. They only have an energy. So really you're trying to defeat the boss as fast as possible, because once you defeat the boss, all of the other enemies that you'll face in the encounter are fatigued as well. So like campaign characters, boss units only have energy abilities, so they don't ever use any energy abilities on 12, but they use their energy abilities every combat turn. So you really have to, that's where a big part of the strategy of the game comes from, is you have to keep in mind that how often, you know, are you going to be rolling a 4, 5, 6, 7 on the dice, or an 8, 9, 10, 11. So the boss cards, the boss fights are obviously very rare. There's only 6 different bosses in the game. There's 7 different missions, but the 7th mission is really just the final boss fight of the game. So that's sort of an example. I think at this point you've seen all the different types of cards there can be. Keep in mind, all of these different types have a big variety of different cards, which really just adds so much to the randomization of the game. and why I find the game so awesome, and why I was so happy that the game sort of was designed the way and turned out the way I intended it to be. So that's sort of just going to be the intro to Travelers of Storia that I wanted to give you. Like I said, I'm going to be having tutorials for the prototype of the game available over the next couple weeks. You're really going to get to see me play it and get a better idea of how it's played. We're going to be doing a website, a Kickstarter, very soon for this project. I really think you guys are going to love it. It's just an entirely new take on deck building games. It's actually ridiculous that there hasn't been a game like this made yet. I honestly wouldn't have even made this game if this wasn't like a niche that I felt like has been empty for just years and years. Why has this game not been created? Why has there not been a cooperative fantasy sort of RPG game made available with deck building elements? And maybe we'll find out why. Maybe some people have some games that they can tell me of that are similar to this, but I really think this is a truly unique take on a board game. Obviously, I have a pipe dream of it becoming a PC game eventually, but for now, I'm just having a blast making this card game, board game, hybrid experience. And once again, you guys are going to love it. I just know it. It's a truly fantastic game. So more information to that to come in the near future. I hope this wasn't too painful for the audio listeners. I really recommend coming into SeemsGoodMagic.com, going to the podcast section, and checking out the video podcast for this, because I think there is a lot of benefits to looking at the visual aspect of this podcast. But thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hopefully Jake will be up and running by next week, and we'll be returning to the cyclical evolution and weird harvest segments of our show. But I'm really happy to give you guys an intro to Travelers of Storia and what to be expecting in the next few weeks. All right, I'll see you guys later.